Hey everybody, welcome to today's call, 5 Shifts to Better Behavior. My name is Lori Petra. I'm the founder of Teach Through Love. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I love doing these calls because it's a chance to connect, find community. I think that the hardest thing about parenting is feeling so alone, and especially if you've been with me for a while and you're not new to this sort of shift that we're going to talk about in parenting, it's hard to find people that understand and that are like-minded, not once they get to know sort of what you're doing, but in the beginning it can feel hard to feel supported. So this is a great place to come on, find and meet other people to connect with. I encourage you guys to go on over to the Facebook page and share your thoughts or just say hi or share your questions there. And also the way this is going to work is we're going to do a short intro. Anybody that's new to me or my work, I'll just tell you a little bit about me and what Teach Through Love is. And then we'll go through our 5 shifts, and I will be happy to answer questions that come in via the Facebook post. And I really came into this work not as someone who's always interested in parent education or wanting to teach kids, or although I did get my college degree, I graduated from Temple University in Philadelphia with my bachelor's in elementary education. But that was really after a traumatic experience in the theater department where I started out. But it worked out well because I always did have an interest in things like psychology and human behavior, communication. But it wasn't really until I was older. I was living in Los Angeles. I was pursuing a career in the arts and entertainment. I was not on this path at all. I was not teaching, but I was always very interested in self-growth and understanding myself, bettering myself, and I sort of came to this journey through this path of self-discovery, of sort of understanding my childhood. And we all have different experiences. There are probably people who had really much more traumatic experiences than I did, and some who have had just happy childhoods, and we all are on this continuum of, this experience of life. So no matter what background you come from, whether it was a harsh background or a really loving, wonderful background, or whether you're sort of mixed about it, which many of us are, my goal is not to tell you how to parent your children, but to really help you find that the best parenting advice is always inside of you. And I found that my own personal growth has just been expanded since I've had my daughter. I started out just really curious naturally. Some of us don't do that. We're just all on different paths. We don't all have the same goals. But when we have kids, automatically we are forced to grow because they test us and they push all kinds of buttons, and they know, my friend, one of my dear friends, Jen, always says that your parents installed the buttons and your children know exactly which ones to push. So it turns out to be very true. So I come to this work as a kid who was really misunderstood. I don't come, again, as someone who wants to tell you how to parent, but I come with a very strong memory of how I felt as a child. And I felt often, my parents, were loving. I grew up in, culturally there was a lot of verbal violence, but my parents were loving. They had good intentions, like many of our parents. And they didn't have intentions to use blame or shame or criticize me. They didn't want me to grow up feeling misunderstood or disrespected, but I have to tell you that I did. I endured a lot of harsh punishment, stuff that needed to be addressed, but not in the punitive, forceful way that I experienced it, because what it did for me was create a lot of stress and anxiety, and that just intensified my behaviors. And I really did, I never learned how to manage my emotions, so I dealt with a lot of rage. On top of that, when I was 38 years old, I found out that I grew up with undiagnosed Asperger's. So that sort of put a really complete picture. It was like the missing piece of my childhood. So I understand now why I was really misunderstood, but I have to tell you that I wasn't a kid that needed anything more than a little more sensitivity and a little more kindness and a lot more tools to manage my stress. And we all have kids that are dealing with all kinds of things, whether it be an autism spectrum issue or ADHD. We have labels for everything these days. And our kids, we have so many experiences, traumatic experiences, medical procedures that have caused some issues for kids that make their growth challenges and their development either delayed or a little behind. And we're all on our own unique path and our own unique timeline of development. So that's why there's no 1, 2, 3 easy answers. This is really not about, okay, if you do this, then your child will just listen to you. I can't do that. If it was that easy, there would be somebody out there selling it, and they'd be like a billionaire living on an island, and we'd all be happy parents, right? It's just not that simple. It's really about being creative and learning to understand ourselves. So I created Teach Through Love as an advocacy organization in the beginning because I had no intentions of ever actually being a parent. It wasn't my path when I started Teach Through Love. I really started it as an advocacy organization to bring awareness to the way we speak to each other, because that has such a huge effect on the way we're able to relate and the way you hear your children speak back to you. And they might not be getting it from you, but they might be getting it from television or from peers. You know, we have so many different influences. And the idea is that we want to be the biggest influence in our child's world. We don't want the television characters to have more of an influence than us. You know, we don't want our kids to be more attached to their peers so that their peers start to have more of an influence. Naturally, that will develop over time. But when we start out, we really want to be able to build influence. If you're looking for only obedience, I can't help you. I don't think anyone can help you. You can certainly use force and control to get obedience, but that will cost you in the long run. So what I want to do is I want to save everybody money on therapy and all kinds of behavioral stuff later, and that costs to your relationship. It takes a little bit more. There's always struggle in growth. And like I said, our kids challenge us to grow, so we have to be willing to withstand a little bit of pain and struggle. It doesn't mean that we have to live in chaos or in fear or with disrespect or things like that, but it means that we have to be flexible. We have to learn how to be emotionally flexible. So I want to help you redefine what it means to you to be in a relationship with your children. I don't want you to think of discipline as something that you have to learn how to do, or you have to learn how to do to your kids. It's really about how are we fostering this ability, our child's developmental ability to interact in positive ways. That's really what we want to do. So this focus on behavior is part of the perspective shift that I want you to change, because your perspective is really what directs your actions. You can't really change how you approach your kids unless you make some subtle shifts in your thinking. So let's talk about that. Let's get right into our 5 shifts to better behavior. I want to say that these 5 shifts to better behavior are not just about your kids' better behavior, but it's really also about our better behavior. How can we shift into better behavior for ourselves as well as our children? Because we are the model, right? So to teach through love doesn't mean that we abdicate responsibility or that we relinquish our authority, but that we are, number one, aware of how our reactions inform and reinforce our child's behavior, and that we are aware of how reacting from an unmanaged emotional state affects our relationship and our child's sense of safety and trust. And you will see that in their behavior, especially the little kids. I mean, all kids for sure, but little kids who have less ability to control their emotions, less impulse control, you will really see it. And also, 3, to be aware of the stages of development and how we can adjust our expectations so that they are developmentally appropriate. Now, of course, we are going to get into this hour that we have together. It may bring up a lot more questions than it answers. I'm starting an 8-week series. I do this twice a year now. I used to do it 4 times a year, but it became really overwhelming with other projects. So now I have this 8-week, really comprehensive, in-depth online parenting series, which I will talk about. But know that I'm going to talk about a lot of this stuff. If it brings up more questions, know that you can probably find the answers in my videos, my website, or in one of my classes, and I will talk about that. So don't get discouraged, or if it feels overwhelming, just go slow. I'm going to give you some tips at the end to just take it day by day so that it doesn't get overwhelming. Because if you're new to it, it may seem overwhelming and you may have a lot of questions. And those questions are great because this whole thing is about self-discovery. It's a path to empowerment. All right, so many of you wrote in and you told me your toughest challenge, and we have lots of aggression going on. And I'm not surprised, because I feel like we live in a really stressed society right now. I know that for me, things can get stressful. I tend to work a lot. I tend to be, like anybody, worried about meeting my responsibilities and making sure my child has what she needs and all these kinds of things. But what happens is when that stress starts to get to us, it affects our behavior, and then it affects our relationships. And if our relationships are suffering under this constant stress or any set of unrealistic expectations, conflict, Our kids, if they experience a lot of threats or force or criticism or harsh handling, punishment, yelling, I know yelling all too well. I know rage really well. I've had to battle them both, and actually I don't like to think of it as battle, but I've had to embrace the shadow side of it and learn to be okay with my anger, and then because when I'm okay with it, when I recognize it, is how I can channel it into better responses. But when we're inconsistent in our responses with our kids, then our kids' ability to self-regulate is really compromised, and their ability to cooperate or their desire to cooperate and to listen and to participate in socially acceptable ways gets interrupted. And we have a lot of stress and pressure from the outside. Society wants children who are pleasant to see, right? And kids see and hear. We want them to be perfect. There's so much criticism of kids who do bad things, and parents like posting photos of them online and this humiliation and, oh, well, that's teaching them a lesson. And I just disagree with that. I just disagree. I'm coming from a completely different perspective. We need to instill respect by showing it. And we don't show respect, and we don't teach, certainly, by making people feel bad about themselves. And I know that's not what our intention is, but I can tell you as a child who remembers her childhood well, that's how I felt. I didn't feel like, oh, okay, I was punished because I did something and now I need to go think about it and I'm really going to learn something here. I felt like, no way, this isn't fair. You're not even listening to me. And I bet my parents felt a lot of pressure from their family as well. So my passion really is for you to be able to have a really kick-ass, healthy relationship with your children, and that requires some big shifts.